roguelikes, and roguelites are a genre that has been growing in popularity over the years, with notable recent games including Balatro, which won 3 awards at the Game Awards, and Elden Ring Night Reign, which is being released next month. But if you've never played a roguelite, what are they exactly? Why do people like them? And what are some good games to try first? Because I love these games so much, I want to help others get into the genre by answering those 3 questions. So let's get into it. There are a lot of different terms thrown around in the roguelite space that can be really confusing to newcomers. Roguelikes with a K, roguelites with a T, roguelike-likes, though that's kind of fallen out of favor, traditional roguelikes, and more recently, I've been seeing rogue games. Something that's both annoying and confusing is that these genre names don't have a single agreed upon definition, which I broke down in this 25-minute video I did a while ago. For now, let's keep things as simple as possible and ignore these names, and just start with the core elements: randomization, permadeath, progression, or lack thereof, and the overarching feeling of these games. One notable thing I'm not talking about yet is core gameplay, and we'll come back to that. Roguelites are games that focus on going on runs of some sort, where you have mostly independent gaming sessions that end with you completing some objective, usually killing a final boss. Each of these runs is randomized across 2 main areas. One, the maps, the areas, the enemies can all be randomized so that what you fight run to run is different. 2, your moveset, your abilities, your passive effects, and your overall build will vary run to run based on what you come across and the choices you make. The permadeath element means that if you die, you have to restart. You lose the upgrades you collected along the way and have to go all the way back to the start. So that special sword and those overpower abilities that you collected are lost. However, most roguelites these days have some form of cross-run progression. So they're things you unlock across runs. This can come in the form of vertical progression, which includes stat increases across runs, or horizontal progression, which adds more variety, like new characters. Let's use Hades, one of the most popular roguelites, to demonstrate this. Every time you play Hades, you go on runs, where you beat a randomized set of enemies, including different mini-bosses and boss variants. While you always start in the same place and follow the same general path, the specifics will be different run to run. Along the way, you collect randomized rewards that stack together and synergize to create fun builds, like stacking different Dionysus buffs together that allow you to kill enemies over time with poison. If you die, your run is over and you have to restart. That's the permadeath. However, you collect currencies on your run that allow you to get that progression. You unlock permanent buffs like increased health or revives, but you can also get different playstyles for future runs by unlocking different weapons and their variants. Altogether, this creates this feeling of going on runs, getting a different experience each time, and then starting over with some new unlocks, as well as slowly increasing your game knowledge and skill set. As mentioned, the specific gameplay type is not an essential part of the genre. What I mean by that is, the roguelite genre is really a secondary genre of sorts that can be used to describe any type of game. You have action roguelites like Hades, but you also have FPS roguelites, card game roguelites, city builder roguelites, Peggle roguelites, and the list goes on and on. So now that we have the basics of the genre, what is the actual difference between all of these terms? One of the most common ways people define roguelike with a K is as a catch-all term for all games in the genre. But other people strongly disagree with that, since roguelite with a K started as a more specific definition of games similar to Rogue, the game the genre is named after. So people that want those more specific niche of games still want a specific term for them. And roguelike was that term for years before newer games came out. The exact line in the sand depends on the exact person, but common lines or boundaries include roguelikes, only referring to traditional roguelikes that follow specific rule sets or guidelines, while others use the term roguelike to refer to games without vertical progression or cross-run buffs that make you more powerful. You might have noticed that I've defaulted to saying roguelite with a T, even though roguelike with a K is more commonly used. That's because I don't play these traditional roguelike games that often, so I like to use roguelite with a T to help differentiate between those traditional games and the ones that I play more often. But at the same time, I stopped being emotionally invested in these definitions years ago when I realized that there's probably never going to be a clear consensus for what these mean. Others have started using rogue games as a less divisive catch-all term for all games in this genre. And on the one hand, I like it. It's a nice term, but it also just adds another term in the mix that can make things more confusing. As a newcomer, that's probably all you need to know about these terms without getting into long tangents and a lot of specific details, which, if you want that, you can watch my previously mentioned video. Otherwise, just know that whichever term you use and however you define it, somebody will be mad at you for using the term roguelike incorrectly. There's a lot of reasons people like myself love roguelites, and it's hard to list all of them or even know where to start. But for a couple broad reasons, roguelites thrive by focusing on gameplay first, theoretically infinite replayability without run-to-run variety, and a satisfying amount of stakes. I think good roguelites shine by focusing first and foremost on good core gameplay. As mentioned, the actual gameplay itself is highly variable, but for the most part, that core gameplay loop is just incredibly fun in good roguelites. Against the Storm, it's one of my favorite roguelites, and one of the reasons is because it has an incredible city building core before we even add on those roguelite elements. Next, a good roguelite promises infinite replayability. In a good roguelite, every run you go on, you're playing something slightly different. You run across slightly different enemies, have a different build, and it all plays out differently. At the same time, you have enough constant elements across runs that you're always improving at the core game. You're mastering build crafting, learning how to work with what the game gives you, and figuring out how to fit all these pieces together to make viable and fun builds. Of course, not every roguelite actually delivers on that promise, but a great roguelite can be played for hundreds or thousands of hours. I think another component of that is that personally, I think that roguelites feel like they respect your time and are great to play in any fashion. You can play 5 hours a day and have a good time. You can play one run a month and have a good time. You never have that feeling that you do in some games where you boot it up for the first time in a while, wonder what you're doing, and have no idea what to do next. Similarly, if you want to play a game for a couple hours and then never play it again, that's something you can do. As opposed to some games where it feels like you've only finished the tutorial and haven't actually gotten to any fun parts. And if you want to keep playing for years, a good roguelite can do that as well, while still showing you new experiences and new combos that you haven't seen. Unlike more standard games that have a set completion time, I like that you can choose how much you want to experience, and it never feels like you're missing out or feel the need to finish a game just because you're 40 hours in to a 50-hour game. So this makes roguelites great for someone like me who has periods both of a lot of free time and very busy periods with basically no free time. The last main thing that I love about roguelites is that they create just the right amount of stakes. All of your choices are meaningful and all of your fights are meaningful. Picking the right relic or card or passive buff can really make or break your run. Also, you can create super OP combos that are incredibly fun, but don't permanently ruin the game because your build resets when you win or lose. Any fight could end your run, and even just taking too much damage at the first boss might stop you from getting to the end. And if you die, you have to start over. You can't just brute force defeat a boss by fighting it again and again from a convenient checkpoint. This all makes it more meaningful when you actually do beat the final boss for the first time. At the same time, most runs last between 30 minutes to an hour and a half if you win, and obviously shorter if you lose. So while the stakes feel meaningful, it's also very manageable. You never get 20 hours in and then realize you actually want to reroll a different character or try a different build. Instead, you just try something different next run. And dying isn't like losing a hardcore character in an MMO or an ARPG. It's a lot lower stakes than that. And with the rise of cross-run progression, even losing can feel good when you unlock new things for future runs. Dying is really a core part of the genre in a way that just differs from a lot of other modern games. So those are just some of the reasons that I personally love roguelites. They're not for everyone, because nothing is, but they are incredibly fun for me. So now you know what roguelites are and why someone might want to play them, but where do you actually start? There's probably thousands of roguelites out there, and I have hundreds of roguelites personally in my Steam library, so it can be overwhelming to sift through all of those and decide which ones are worth your time and effort. I want to rapid fire out some recommendations of games I think are both worth playing and also fairly accessible to newcomers in the genre. I'm going to list these recommendations based on gameplay genre. The hope is that if you're lost, just think of the general type of game that you want to play and start with the recommendations for the roguelike takes on those genres. Starting with card game roguelites, I recommend starting with Slay the Spire. It's an incredibly fine-tuned and well-balanced roguelite that essentially set the example for years of what it means to be a card game roguelite. My two alternative card game recommendations are Monster Train, if you want a larger focus on units, or Balatro, for a very unique game that riffs on poker hands with roguelite mechanics. Action roguelites are probably the next largest category, and there are a lot of different games that fit into that umbrella. For more standard action roguelites, i.e. isometric, top-down, or platformers, I recommend Hades, The Binding of Isaac, and Dead Cells respectively. Hades is one of the most well-rounded roguelites with solid gameplay, good builds, and uniquely incredible art design and story for a roguelite. Isaac is the absolute king when it comes to variety of builds. And Dead Cells has some of the best combat with a high skill ceiling and lots of difficulty for those that want that. There's also an increasing amount of roguelite shooters. For first-person shooters, I recommend Gunfire Reborn for the best roguelite elements in an FPS game, and I recommend RoboQuest for those that care more about that FPS than the roguelite part. For third-person shooters, I recommend starting with Risk of Rain 2. It has great character variety, great items, and build crafting, though probably ignore that latest DLC for now. Returnal is also great, and a rare AAA or at least AA roguelite. It has great visuals and setting with fun bullet hell combat. For more miscellaneous genres, I recommend The Void Reigns Upon Her Heart as a shoot 'em up. It's a boss rush game with great fights and lots of fun progression. I recommend Against the Storm as a city builder roguelite. As I mentioned, it's both one of my favorite city builders and one of my favorite roguelites. Lots of complexity and optimization if you want that, but also more straightforward gameplay if you don't. I'll also recommend Inkbound as a fun turn-based roguelite that feels very different from other turn-based games that I played, due to how fluid the combat is. Vampire Survivors is another one that sparked a whole new subgenre of survivor-likes or bullet heaven games. It's focused on great build variety and progression at the cost of more simple gameplay. I don't play traditional roguelites as much, but Caves of Qud and Tales of Maj'Eyal are both good starting points for my limited experience. These games offer deeper RPG experiences at the cost of a steeper learning curve. The final recommendations that I'll give is that you can really start anywhere you want to. I picked games that I think represent different aspects of the genre, are well polished, and I think will have broader appeal. But you can really start with any game that draws your interest. For me, I started with Nuclear Throne, a fast-paced shooter with bite-sized, frantic, just fun runs. Similarly, if a game doesn't keep your interest, don't be afraid to try another one. Not everyone likes all of these games because the actual gameplay can be so different. I've never enjoyed Vampire Survivors in similar games, but it's a whole exploding genre with a lot of dedicated fans. If you're a lover of the roguelite genre like me, I would love to hear your own suggestions for starting points or what game got you into the genre in the first place. I also have reviews of a lot of these games on my channel, and I just released a roundup of all the new roguelites that I played in 2024 last month. So feel free to check out those videos if you're interested. Huge shout out to all of our channel members for helping support the channel. Please like this video to help me out in the algorithm, and thanks for watching.